Welcome to Everything About Web. My name is Jamie Cavanaugh, and this is the Media Queries tutorial. So what makes a design responsive? We know that there are three ingredients that make a design responsive. One is flexible grids, so we need to make sure that the widths of our divs are set to percentage in our CSS. We also need to change our fonts to M's, and we also create percentages for our margins and padding. Number two is that our images and our other media are flexible. So we have set the maximum width for our images and other media to 100%. And then finally, the third thing that makes a design responsive are media queries. So what is a media query? A media query is basically when you define a media type, such as screen or print, and you specify that the look of the content by specifying conditions or by creating a query. So you're specifying conditions such as width, height, or orientation. So a media query combines a media type and a condition to specify how your web content is going to appear on any particular device. So we can add media queries in one of two ways. We could add a media query as a separate CSS file. So you'll see in the example here that it is a link. So very similar to how you would link a regular style.css file. This one in the example is called smallscreen.css. And then the condition is that it is for 480 pixels maximum width. So it's for everything smaller than 480 pixels, all viewports. The second way is to create an at media. And you use the @ media only screen, and then again you give this condition of the maximum width, and you'll see it's followed by the curly brackets, and I have the three dots, the ... You would put in your CSS rule between those curly brackets. So let's take a look at an example of at media. We're going to investigate how to add media queries to our site using the at media. So if we look at the example, we can check out the syntax for it. So notice it starts out with the @ media screen, and then we've got our, in this case, our width, and then inside of that we have our rule for our body, our CSS rule. So note that every media query has two components. It has a media type, so for instance screen, print, all. And the second part of it is the query, and the query is what's wrapped in the parentheses. And it's split into two components. There's the actual naming of the feature. In the example previous, the feature was the minimum width, and then a corresponding value, which again in the example was 1024 pixels. Something to note, and you can see that in our example here, I have shown you the two components, and also notice I've placed the first set of curly braces in red. Be sure that your media query does include the initial set of curly brackets, curly braces, and inside of those curly braces is your CSS rule. And in this case, it is a CSS rule to declare the font size 100% for the body tag. A couple other things to note, that for some features they will accept minimum and max prefixes. So in our example using the feature width, you can serve your CSS conditionally. So for instance, for viewports above 1024 pixels, you can write that by specifying min width for minimum width of 1024 pixels, Or for viewports below 1024 pixels, you could specify that as max width for maximum width of 1024. You can also chain multiple queries together. So you can use a keyword like and to chain queries. So in our example here, at media screen, we've got two separate queries. One for the minimum device width of 480 pixels, and then we've also specified the feature of orientation and have declared that as being landscape. There are several different types of media features, minimum width, maximum width. That is used when you want to declare the viewport's width as bigger or smaller. There's a minimum device width, a maximum device width. That's used to determine the device's width and declare whether it's bigger or smaller. And then the orientation of the screen, be it portrait or landscape. There are some common breakpoints for media queries. And you know, the devices are being created and in a whole variety of different sizes. So this is just a very short list, but some of the common breakpoints are 1000 pixels, 760, 600, 480, and 320. Now, if any of you have ever looked at a website on an iPhone in Safari, you'll note that what happens with Safari is it will display your website, the entire website, and just sort of scale it and miniaturize it. So there is a piece of code that we're going to be putting into the head of our document in order to solve this dilemma. So you'll see here that there's a meta tag here, and the initial scale property sets the zoom level of the page to 1.0 or 100%. And this piece of code helps ensure that there is some consistency across small screen viewport aware browsers. So we will be using that in the head of our HTML. And here's a little example. You can see here is just a snippet of our HTML. This is between the opening and the closing head tag, and you can see here is that meta tag. And then finally, just to give you a little snippet of CSS with a media query, you'll see that this is just inserted into your CSS. I have it here inserted below our CSS for our footer. And it states that at media screen for maximum width 768 pixels. So this means for anything smaller than 768 pixels that our wrapper width will be 100%. So that's just a beginning of media queries. I hope you continue to study more. Please visit us on the web at www.everythingaboutweb.com, on YouTube, and also on Twitter.